All right, hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining our webinar today. My name is Iolani Lightborn. I'm Senior Associate Director of Admissions here at Georgetown McDonough, and we are going to talk through a little bit about the Georgetown experience, but then get to the meat of our conversation, which will be our two consortium students, one first year and one second year, who you'll get to meet shortly, and they will talk about their experience in the consortium and at Georgetown. We'll also take your questions toward the end in the chat box. So hold them till the end. Unless there's anything burning or pressing, we're happy to answer them throughout. But we'll have a lot of questions that our two consortium students will talk through. So thanks again for joining us. All right, and so why Georgetown McDonough? So one thing I failed to mention is that I'm actually a part-time student here at Georgetown, and so I decided to join Georgetown for a couple of different reasons, and some that I think really resonate with our students. First and foremost, we are a Jesuit institution, and so we are really sort of steeped in values. And I think when you think about business, oftentimes it's very sort of cold and cutthroat, and Georgetown really is not that sort of place. One thing that I think our students can attest to is that when you're in a lot of your different classes, you're talking about that sort of double or triple bottom line. So not just how much money are we making, but what are the communities that are being impacted by our decisions? And when I talk to some of my friends at other schools, they're not having those conversations. So that helps me understand that Georgetown's a little bit of a different place when it comes to business school. As you can see on the bottom of the screen, our mission is to build principled leaders that have a global mindset in both business and society. Principled leadership is really big here. You actually have 3 leadership courses throughout your time at Georgetown, where you are learning leadership principles. You're looking at, profiles of different leaders. You are understanding communication from a leadership standpoint. But outside of the classroom, you have really awesome opportunities to get involved. So there are 40 plus clubs that you can get involved in. I think most students are involved in multiple, on the boards of some, but you're really able to practice that leadership role outside of the classroom as well as inside of the classroom. Global mindset at Georgetown is actually baked into the curriculum. So part of your experience in the core curriculum is all students go abroad and do a global consulting project in their second year. I actually just got back from my project, just to give you an example, where I was in Shanghai, China, working with Marriott International on expanding their wedding business in the region. And so you really get that hands-on experience where you're able to take everything you've learned in your core and put it to practice. Another thing with global is that your classmates are from everywhere. So about 30% of our full-time class is international from 40 different countries. And so your first network of people, oftentimes when you get to Georgetown, are people from all different backgrounds, and you're in teams with them and working with them, which is really interesting. And then, as I mentioned, business and society is big in terms of values, but we also have a very service-based culture. So at the end of your time at Georgetown, we actually give out an award for the person that's done the most amount of service. All of our clubs have service as part of their mission, and people on the boards that focus on community service. So if that's something you're interested in, Georgetown's definitely the right place for you. Being in Washington, D.C. is awesome, and I'm from New York, so saying that's like a big deal. One thing that I would say is, as you're thinking about where to get your MBA, you want to think about access. And access to employers, access to speakers, access to companies. And one thing I love about DC is that all of our students have that access. For instance, I've heard everyone here speak, from General Petraeus, if you're on the more conservative side, to Edward Snowden being piped in on a line from Russia. And so we really get a wide variety of people. We had an alum that came back, the CFO of Airbnb, Shaquille O'Neal, was here. I mean, you really get to see a lot of different people because, Washington, D.C. is the actual intersection of business and policy. And so if you are a person in the business world, you really have to come through Washington, D.C. in order to do business, understand how business is done and how policy affects that. Another thing is Washington, D.C. is fun. So all the embassies are here. Every May, they have a big embassy day where they all open up and you're able to visit and do all of that. But also, as you're thinking about recruiting, it's a big deal because companies are able to come here. A lot of companies have either headquarters here or offices here. So Under Armour is here. Amazon, we just learned, is having an office in the DMV area. And for those of you that don't know, DMV is DC, Maryland, Virginia. Nestle is moving their headquarters here, but then Twitter, Google, Facebook, et cetera, have offices here too. One last thing I'll mention about DC is that there's a really growing startup scene. So our students actually work with an incubator in downtown DC called 1776, where they're able to work with the entrepreneurs that are there, learn about the startup culture. And so you really have access to all of those different things if you choose to study in Washington, DC. This just gives you a sense of our full-time curriculum. I won't spend too much time on it, but basically, just to give you a high-level sense, the dark blue is the core, your core courses. The red are our career days that went through, and then the green are your electives. One unique thing about Georgetown is that before we even step foot on campus, our Career Center is working with you over 3 weeks of webinars where you are providing deliverables and other things with regard to your sort of career portfolio. Then we have an opening term. So you go through orientation, but then you do opening term. And that's essentially giving you your first taste of our interdisciplinary curriculum. So the first class you take is something called the Structure of Global Industries, or SGI, which is sort of a mashup of business meets econ meets global business and policy and ethics all together. So to give you a sense, in my SGI class, we went over a case about H&M and had to understand all the economic sort of trade reasons as to why H&M produces all of their clothes in Bangladesh. Our ethics professor was co-teaching the class and sort of overlaid information about a factory collapse in the region. And our first question to us as like 3-week-old MBA students was, does H&M have any responsibility to reform the safety laws even though their clothes were not produced in the factory that collapsed? So that sort of gives you a sense of, how you're thinking about these business problems from many different angles in your very first class. As you go through the curriculum, you're taking, as you would in any business school, accounting and finance, stats, operations. With our curriculum, you do start taking electives in the spring of your first year to help you get ready for those internships. When you come back in your second year, it's mostly all electives with the exceptions of the Principled Leadership course and then our Global Business Experience, which I mentioned already. So with that, I'm actually going to pause here and see if there are any questions on anything that I mentioned up front, and I'm happy to answer them. And if not, we are going to go to our 2 consortium students that are here as well. All right, I see one question. What is Career Week Fall Break? Awesome. So Career Week is basically, actually, let me step back. Your career curriculum, as I mentioned, starts before you get here with those 3 weeks of webinars, but then all fall every Friday are our career days. And so there's been marketing day, finance day, et cetera. So it sort of gets your feet wet in different industries, consulting day, so you can see if those are really sort of what you want to do in terms of recruiting for them. And then Career Week, and maybe I'll have Barrett and Esme talk a little bit more about it, but that is sort of another chance for you to really focus on the industries or functions that you're interested in doing. Alumni come back to campus, you do different events, practice case studies, et cetera, to really sort of see if that's what you're interested in. Any other questions? Nope. All right. Well, with that, as you can see on the screen, I am joined by Barrett and Esme, so I'm going to stop here. I'm sure you want to hear from them and have them introduce themselves.
Hi all, my name is Barrett Mueller. I'm a second year in the full-time MBA program. Before coming to business school, I was in education, so I was working for a charter school on the south side of Chicago that serves low-income African-American males. I worked as a teacher in one of our schools, and then also provided alumni support, doing program management work. Came to get my MBA here at Georgetown because I wanted to view business from multiple lenses. So not only from business, but from a policy lens, from a governance lens, because I think those issues are all critical, especially moving forward. I spent this past summer working at Cognizant doing consulting work in the tech sector. Full-time, I'm still recruiting right now, but I have a few offers at a couple different consulting firms. So very exciting time. I was a double switcher, so both industry and function. Happy to talk more about that. Happy to talk more about Consortium if anyone has questions.
Hi, everyone. My name is Esme Rogers. I'm a first year here in the full-time MBA program. My background is in insurance. For about 4.5 years, I worked in insurance broking and consulting in both Atlanta and in New York. Originally from New York, went to Howard undergrad. I'm pursuing my MBA. It was also to switch career and industry and function. So trying to get into diversity and inclusion. And an MBA was the right thing for me because it's about that double, triple bottom line, as Iolani said before. It's not about how money affects these things, but understanding the greater goals. So my MBA was the way to do that for me.
Awesome. Can you guys talk about sort of taking a step back where many of you are that are on the line? What was your thought process as you were thinking about, number one, which schools to decide to apply to, but also applying to the consortium versus not?
Yeah, so for me, I was looking at schools. I was really looking at schools through consortium, first of all. Working in education before coming to school, diversity, inclusion, those types of social issues were and still are very important to me. And I thought that consortium was a great avenue to have a group of people who thought similarly and were concerned about the same types of issues as me. And I think, my experience so far, that's been met 100%. Again, also looking at some of the different programs, I wanted to be in an urban location in a big city. I wanted to have access to all the biggest companies, consulting firms, other tech companies. And also, like I mentioned before, I wanted to view business from multiple lenses. And I think the access that Georgetown gets being in DC and having the brand that it does, we're able to bring amazing speakers to campus. We're able to have opportunities that frankly don't exist at other places in DC and certainly not at places outside of DC.
For me, with my end goal being diversity and inclusion, applying to the consortium was something that was key for me. It automatically gave me a flag that these schools care about diversity and inclusion and have that as a pillar of their institutions. So that was the first step. As far as selecting schools, I mainly focused on region. So I wanted to be in the Northeast and looked at schools there. And then Georgetown popped out to me based upon the values. So the Jesuit tradition was huge for me, as well as the consortium values. And just coming to see the student body and that collaboration that I felt here was something that I didn't see in a lot of other schools.
How important was it for you guys to visit the schools that you were looking at?
Super important.
I'll let Esme take that one.
Yeah, I went to every diversity weekend that happened. Every school offers some sort of weekend, some sort of chance. Before I applied, I think Iolani saw me about 5 times.
I literally saw it 5 times.
Before I started at Georgetown. It was all throughout the application process, probably almost every step of the way. But the biggest thing that happens, and you'll hear this a million times, is fit. And there's no way to quantify fit. You're not going to get that from reading a website. You're not going to get that from watching videos. You're going to get that from speaking to people and actually being on campus. So I took every opportunity I could.
Yeah, and I will say, so I remember meeting Esme, I think I was in New York recruiting and hosted a coffee chat. So, you don't have to go to the big flashy events, but we literally just connected over coffee. And I was talking about my experience. And so that could be good ways too, if you're not sure about your schools, where you can get a good sort of sense about the program and the people, because it's a huge investment. You really want to make sure that you feel comfortable. So I would say any small events, maybe start there as an entree to the larger events. And I saw a question come through in terms of how many schools did you guys apply to? Can you talk about whether or not you maxed out your 6 on your consortium map and then did others, or did you just do the 6? What was your sort of ratio?
So I think I applied to 5 of the 6 for consortium, and I applied to a few others outside of consortium. Came down to deciding between Georgetown and another school that was not in consortium. When I was thinking about it, the consortium is something that I was really interested in, and through the people I had met, I thought it was just the right group of people that I wanted to be around. And, going to business school, from an education background, I knew there was going to be a big transition. So I thought that this group was going to be a group that I could really lean on as I got into these finance accounting classes that I had never seen before. Not only that, but also having a diverse group of people there to support me was also crucial in making my decision.
Yeah, I also applied to 5 schools, but I did 3 consortium and 2 outside of the consortium. And as Barrett said, it came down to seeing like that actual group of students after you are accepted, after that time of who's going to be in your class and where you can see yourself fitting best with those people. So again, that's another visit that you'll do.
Great. And so now I think I'll delve a little bit more into like sort of the application process. So the way that it works in general, as you guys may know, is you have up to 6 schools. So the great thing about the consortium is you save so much money because it's essentially a common app, right? So you get to apply to 6 schools with 1 application, and then the consortium essentially gets all of your documents and then gives them out to the schools that you apply to. So you will see that there may be specific school questions like in your consortium app that we ask, but we get all of your documents through the consortium, so you don't submit anything to us. I see one question on the application: how can one demonstrate his or her commitment to the consortium's mission? Yeah, so I am trying to remember the consortium specific questions, but I think in general, and you guys probably know better than I do, but the consortium is looking for people that have demonstrated some commitment to diversity. So Barrett talked about his work, literally working with diverse populations. Esme obviously has done a lot of different things, but also talked about how she wants to go into diversity and inclusion. Maybe, is there anything else you guys would say?
Yeah, so I worked in insurance, which is very far from the diversity and inclusion area, but it was my volunteer work. So having that listed on my resume, as well as there's an additional recommendation that's required for consortium, where someone has to speak to your commitment to diversity and what you've done. So having a board member on a board that I was on a junior board of speak to what I've done there, having that commitment show across my resume, that additional supplemental essay where you have to speak on your commitment to diversity in the business world, as well as having someone else speak to that for you.
Yeah. So the next thing I want to talk about are the rankings, because I know that can be a little bit tough to navigate or hard to think about. And so I would say just in general, one thing that you guys want to think about as you're thinking about your consortium rankings are, number one, doing your research before you put down your rankings. The rankings are important because the way that you rank the schools is how the schools are able to give you or offer you fellowship money. And so if there's a school you figure out that you really like that you rank at the end, they may not be able to offer you money or offer you a fellowship. So that's just something to consider. But do you guys have any tips for ranking or sort of how you thought about it before you did it?
Just be intentional. Yeah. It matters. The fact that the school that you rank first has that first opportunity to offer you the fellowship or the membership into the consortium. And this is a very expensive process being in business school. So it's very intentional that you want to put that your first choice as your true top ranking.
Although the rankings will not have any factor on your admission to any of the schools. My understanding is that the consortium gets the applications, they push them out to all the schools. The AdComs do their thing, come back yes or no, and then that's when the whole ranking comes into place after you've gotten all of your decisions, yes or no, from all of the schools.
Yeah, so it's a sort of blind process in that way, which is good for you because they are just going off of your merit, off of your application, not off of how you rank them. Great, so now that we talked about the application a bit, can you guys talk about OP? So you applied, you got in, oh my gosh, yes, I'm going to Georgetown. Then they're like, hey, there's this OP thing you have to go to, this orientation program. What was that?
Yeah, it was a whirlwind. I guess Barrett was at my OP as our
I liked it so much I went twice.
But it was a whirlwind. Preparing for it, there was webinars. We start those 3 weeks of career work a little bit earlier so that we're prepped and ready for OP, had our resumes ready, had our tell me about yourselves ready, and had to be like very polished by the time we got there. And this is in June, so well before we started classes in August. It was great. There's some extra prep that happens while you're there, and we also get to have our career advisors with us a lot earlier than a lot of people who are applying in other ways. So having those connections in advance was very beneficial. And I was able to walk away with an offer in diversity and inclusion. And this is something that I have no background in, but with the work of the Career Center, working on my story, working on my resume, I was able to make that, or be able to sell that story and sell that transition.
Yeah, I think the value of OP is huge. Not only are you getting access to the Career Center very early, there's not a lot of people in Consortium. Although we've grown over the past several years, the first class was 4 years ago, I think, and there were 9, and now we're up to 29 students per class. My class in 2018 is 21. Esme's class is 29 students. But that career attention is really going to that 29 students to get them ready for the career fair at OP. These employers are coming looking to give out internship offers to you before you've even set foot in a classroom, months before.
Wow.
which is incredible. And the opportunities there, they're with huge companies. And I think that's very unique in that these companies aren't necessarily going to be as aggressive at recruiting just any old student, because they know you're committed to diversity. This is something that they all know they need to get better at for the most part. So I think that the career opportunities at OP are great, and you get to also meet the entire consortium class across all the schools. As we graduate and move up in the ranks in business, nonprofit, government, whatever it is that we decide to do, we're going to have a very large network of professionals across the country, which I think is really going to stand out as we progress in our careers.
Yeah. And so, OP is just, as I mentioned, an awesome opportunity, but Georgetown provides a whole delegation that goes with you. So the students go. Barrett went this year because we send second-year students that have already done it to help the first years. The Career Center goes with you. Member of admissions go with you. It's also supposed to be really sort of like a big pep rally to get you ready for school. So every school's wearing their swag and they have chants and cheers. And so it's a really fun way to kick off your business school experience. But we also get down to business and make sure you're ready for that recruiting process, which happens for you in OP way earlier than it does for your non-consortium peers.
Yeah, one other thing I just want to quickly add about the career side. I think our Career Center did an amazing job, Doreen and Angela and the rest of the team down there, not only getting everyone prepped, but then during the interviews, they were outside of the interview booths literally the entire day. And I think they were the only school or only people that had done that for us. Just to have them as moral support, if an interview didn't go well, they're there to pick you back up, help you bounce back. If you have a really great one, they're there to celebrate with you. So just, little things like that, I think really make a big difference in, how your experience goes at OP.
Yeah. And I also like to add, this is your first introduction to the rest of your consortium class, like Barrett said, but we also got to learn each other's strengths and play off of them where, we were up prepping for interviews super late at night, but it was like the Career Center wasn't there. So it's just all right, running through interview questions, behavioral questions amongst each other. We had some people who had interview experience or recruiting experience. And so helping out in industries where other people may have wanted to go.
Awesome. And so OP's over, you walk away with your offers, great. And then you get to Georgetown. Can you talk about what that was like coming into the school, maybe what your expectations were, how they were different? And I'll just add, so on day one of orientation, basically it's an all hands on deck process where the school jumps in to help out with orientation. And I remember seeing Esme's new consortium class, and they all were like magnets to each other. It was like they had seen their best friends. It was so cool to see them all together. And so I think that's also a benefit. You sort of have this network before you even start. So you all are best friends and everyone else is like, hey, I want to be in the cool kids band too.
Yeah, that was definitely true. So not all of our class was able to attend OP, but there were a solid 20 of us who were all there. We've been talking to each other since before June, having like in-depth conversations, getting to know each other beyond just what do you want to do with your life? What are you trying to get out of business school? So by the time we got here on our first day, we kind of automatically had just like 20 people that it was safe to stand next to. Like you're starting over the first day of school again, and coming in and having a seat in the cafeteria is like one of the most comforting things to have that first day. But then it's also a matter of you are given other groups when you get here. So our group just started to grow. And when you're adding other team members from outside of the consortium, like we all have our favorites of other people's groups that just kind of joined in and like have expanded and who will come to our consortium events or are adjacent to our consortium family almost. So we're growing, but it's very nice.
Good. And so in terms of, and Esme, this is for you, your first year, how was that transition process, especially with all the business courses? What sort of resources were you given? How'd you make it through?
Yeah, so I was an econ major in undergrad. So I came in and I'm like, okay, SGI, that's basically like macro econ. This will be cool. And no, it was like, it's very intense. That opening term, going back to having classes and group work 9 to 5, basically, as opposed to having my job and sitting doing my tasks over the course of a day was an extreme adjustment, but you're not doing it alone. My class is 280 students. So we had 279 other students who are also making that adjustment. So there's a lot of corners where you'll just see people overwhelmed, but you can be overwhelmed together and get through it. And as far as resources, we have the second years and there are resources that they provide to us. We get introductions to clubs early and then those resources, and there's always we get mentors through certain clubs. There's tutoring always available. There are second years who do that and able to like do private sessions sometimes. If you need some more than that, there's always something available or a resource that you can ask you're 1 degree away from.
Great. What were some of your favorite classes? Maybe Esme's in the core still. So.
Yeah.
Not that the core isn't fun.
I am enjoying firm analysis and strategy right now.
Nice.
One class that I liked last year from the core was our business policy class.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, again, kind of gets back to the one of the differentiators of Georgetown. We're not just going to be looking at straight business from a business lens all the time. This was, a business and policy class. So we were looking at some of the political risk baked into, doing business in developing nations. How does that impact your supply chain? What are the kind of ethical things that are coming up? I thought it was a really good blend of a lot of different important issues that, we're going to face once we graduate. For electives, there are a couple classes that if you're going into consulting, you kind of need to take with HOMA, a frameworks class about deck building and another Excel modeling class. Those are very helpful and applicable. They're a lot of work, but they both really prepared me for success in my internship.
Awesome. Another differentiator for Georgetown are that we have these electives called ILEs, or intensive learning experiences, and they are essentially electives that are condensed to 1 or 2 weeks. So in 2 weeks, you get 3 credits, and 1 week you get 1.5 credits. And I've taken a number of them, and what I love about it is that because they're so short, we're able to bring in these really cool practitioners that can't teach for a whole semester, but can teach for 1 or 2 weeks. So I took one called Mobile Apps, and we had a guy named Ken Dodlin who runs innovation at Capital One come and teach our class. And we learned all about building mobile apps and bots, sort of how they're changing the face of many industries. And it was just so cool to sort of complement what you're doing on a day-to-day basis in the core with something that's a little bit more topical and really interesting. We also have 2 certificates that you can take at Georgetown. So one is called Non-Market Strategy, and that's for people that are really interested in exploring a little bit more about that intersection of business and policy. And another one is called our International Business Diplomacy Certificate, and that's with the School of Foreign Service. And so you would essentially use most of your elective credit in order to fulfill the requirements for those certificates. Great. So now that we talked about your application process, the curriculum, let's talk about all the fun stuff. So what clubs are you guys involved in? How do you sort of engage with the Georgetown community outside of the classroom?
Yeah. So like Iolani and Esme mentioned, I'm the second year consortium liaison. So very involved with consortium and, everyone involved with that. I'm also on the board of Black MBA, and also a member of Consulting Club and Net Impact. Last year in Net Impact, I was a board fellow. That was a really great opportunity to serve on the board of a local nonprofit. The specific nonprofit I worked for was called Student Global Ambassador Program. They provided different resources for students age 14 to 18-ish, outside of the classroom, getting more hands-on learning, design thinking. The nonprofit had recently moved to DC, so I helped them set up some of their strategic marketing and also strategies for growth there.
So it's ramping up for us. We've joined clubs, and I've probably spent a lot of money joining way too many clubs.
There are club dues, remember that.
I am in Black MBA as well. I actually just was accepted into Board Fellows, and the organization that I'll be on the board for, non-voting member, is the National Trust for the Historic Preservation. So it's one based here in DC, but is a national nonprofit that deals with probably everything under the sun when it comes to historic preservation. Really excited for that. Our project, it's more project-based this year, which is a little bit different. We're working on new revenue streams for an existing nonprofit. Also a member of the Consulting Club, as well as GWIB, which is the Georgetown Women in Business. Yolani sits on that board. And a lot of others. The Wine Society, Gourmet Society.
Yeah.
My boyfriend is in the Partners Club. A lot of the other ones that I'm missing at this moment.
Yeah. And one thing to note too, so you can get involved in clubs. We also have centers and initiatives. So we have an entrepreneurship initiative, one for real estate, one for research into women in leadership, one for business and policy, finance. So you can get involved as graduate assistants there as well. So some people sort of decide to spend their time doing that. And then there are other ways you can get involved. So we have international service treks. We have career treks that you can do where you're going to the West Coast to visit technology companies or New York to visit finance companies. And then we also have really cool international just trips abroad. So I just found out that I'll be going to Israel in December because I got accepted to the Israel trek. And the Black MBA, we are actually just launched as of yesterday a Tanzania trek. So students at MSB are able to sign up or apply in order to be one of 20 students that will be traveling to Tanzania to learn about how business is done there, culture, and meet with alumni in the region. So you can get involved in so many ways at Georgetown, and it's a really fun place to be outside of the classroom.
They also have, there's also other, I guess, unofficial groups that get together over breaks. So for example, spring break last year, I went with several of my friends and classmates to Cuba. That was not affiliated with the school at all, but just a group of us decided that we wanted to go somewhere and just made it happen.
MBA life.
Yeah.
Awesome. So at this point, what sort of tips or advice would you give people at this stage in the process? You know, they're still considering schools. I don't know how many of you guys are still taking your GMAT or GRE, but is there any advice or anything you wish you would have known as you were just about to sort of rank your schools and apply?
I definitely wish that I had relaxed a little bit more. I took the GMAT and then immediately went into essays and recommendations, and then immediately went into prepping for doing a bunch of summer prep programs. So being aware that those exist, that they're you can spend your summer pretty much prepping to get an internship, but you can also spend your summer traveling the world and having fun. So taking a little bit more time to myself, I wish it was something I had done.
I think it helps to be intentional, like Esme was saying, not only with the rankings, but also where you want to apply. Not only are you going to be spending two years in a new place or in a, if you're still in DC, at a different school, but also these are people that you're going to know for the rest of your life. And, the friends that I've made, certainly, I'm going to continue to stay in touch with them after we graduate. I've really appreciated the friendships that I've created here, especially in Consortium. I think that's one thing, that I didn't think enough about coming in. I definitely lucked into it, I think, with the consortium crew that we have here and also with the class. But yeah, this is not only the next 2 years will be very important, but also after the 2 years get done, that's also extremely important. And the relationships that you build here, I think at Georgetown and in Consortium are very genuine and very real. And I think, that's something also to consider as you go through this application process.
Definitely. So at this point, I want to make sure that we leave time for you guys to ask questions. So if you wouldn't mind just typing your questions in the chat box, and we're happy to answer whatever questions are on your mind. All right, here we go. How did you all go about choosing your recommendations for the consortium mission? Or I guess recommenders too.
Yeah, so my commitment and goals with diversity and inclusion, my past had mostly been volunteer work, and then what I read about in the future was my career goals. So I spoke to somebody that could speak to my past and my work with volunteerism, especially with the diversity and inclusion or diverse backgrounds, especially working with students, getting them into college, getting students after college into the business world. So that was the biggest thing for me, just having someone who can truly vouch for that and speak to it, because it's not something that explicitly sticks out on my resume.
Yeah, when I was applying, working in education, I was fortunate to, kind of have that built in already with some of my supervisors. I happened to be pretty close with the CEO of the charter network that I was working for, and also the chief academic officer. So I had them write my essays. They knew, from the work that I had done and, the amount of time I'd stayed there that I was committed to diversity and committed to serving underprivileged populations. So I think it's helpful just to have someone who can really speak to the depth of your experiences, and not someone who, can write a generic letter, because anyone can do that. I think it's more powerful when you have someone who can really speak to your commitment in a genuine manner.
Mm-hmm. The next question we have, how much do you think location impacts experience?
Location-wise, just personally, having worked both in the South and the North, and being from the North, mm-hmm. I think there's a huge difference there. You learn a lot about doing business in different places, and that's something I definitely spoke to a lot influenced my decisions making as far as my career. So it's something that I guess is up to you, but it's all about how you interpret and what you've learned from those experiences in different locations to speak to impact. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. Also, I think, I would never say, and I don't think anyone would ever say Georgetown's the right place for everybody, right? You really want to make sure that when you're thinking about what you want to get out of your MBA, you are considering all the factors. So do you want to be in a big city? Are you from a big city? Esme and I are from New York, Barrett's from Chicago, so we're sort of used to big cities, but maybe that's not what you're looking for. Do you want access to companies while you're in school? Do you think that you'd, enjoy being in a place that's a little bit more rural? It's really up to you, but I think that it impacts your experience in terms of the access that you have right away. And, that could be a good or a bad thing. So really, it's totally up to you. So a couple more questions have rolled in. I have more transcripts that want fits on the consortium application. Is there a way to send the extra to Georgetown separately? Sure, you can just email us at georgetownmba@georgetown.edu. I would just note your name and let us know that you're applying to the consortium, and just say these are some additional transcripts that I have that I wasn't able to attach, and we'll take them that way, no problem. Next question. So we got a call about applying to full-time and evening. Can you explain that you can only be, yep. So one thing I want to make sure that we clarify is that you can apply to both programs. So we know that some people are on the fence thinking about, do I want to go full-time or part-time? I have the same sort of conundrum, if you will. If you are applying through the consortium, you can only apply through the consortium as a full-time student. However, at Georgetown, you can apply to both programs separately. So you can submit a non-consortium application to our part-time or evening program through our website, and also apply through the consortium. If you get into both programs or as separate application pools, then we'll ask you to sort of make a decision at that point. Which exam do you think is better to take, GMAT or GRE?
I personally only took the GMAT.
Same.
So I think it goes to the best way that you learn. And if one is not working for you, I've heard this before. If it's not working and you've tried a certain number of times, there is diminishing return on continuing to take the same test.
Yeah.
From an admission standpoint, I don't think there's a difference.
Yeah, there's no difference from an admission standpoint. The only caveat is that if you want to go into consulting or investment banking, they typically will ask for your GMAT score and not a GRE score. So I would say if you are thinking about those two industries, I would definitely go the GMAT route. Other than that, take a practice test online, whichever one you gel better with, go with that test. All right, what tips or advice do you have to make the transition from working to going back to school? Yeah, so how has that transition been for you guys, and what tips do you have to sort of ease your way into it?
So I think, what Esme said earlier is just to kind of relax over the summer.
Yeah.
School is very busy. You're going to be doing, not only are you taking classes, you're recruiting for your internship. You have social events, club events, you're making new friends. So it's just a very busy time. The professors kind of come in knowing that some people might have not been at school for a long time, and you need to knock some of the rust off. I mean, they're going to be understanding. They're not going to, they're not going to like make things easier for you, but there's an understanding there that, you're coming in and you have had work experience, and they expect you to bring in your work experience into the class and to share, how you have been doing, what you've been doing previously and how it can apply in class.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd also say when you're transitioning, I mean, as we keep saying, like, you have to give yourself a break. Many of you have been out of school. I mean, our average is 5 years of work experience. We've been out of school for 5 years. It's very different coming back, figuring out, how do I study again? Can I stay up till 2 a.m. and cram? I know I cannot. But it's just so different now. So you really just want to take it day by day, take it week by week. We have classes only Monday through Thursday, and Thursday we sort of celebrate the end of getting through another week. And so I think with the support network of your classmates, the second year students, your mentors, and the faculty and staff, you will be fine. But you just have to make sure that you sort of take a deep breath and make sure that you understand that it will be a transition. It's not going to be a smooth sail, but it's going to be the same for everybody. So awesome. And let's see, I see one more question. Is there a place I can view what score on the GRE I should be aiming for? So we actually don't have an average GRE score, and that's because the GRE is still on 2 different scoring rubrics. Once the oldest rubric sort of is, times out, we will have an average, but at this point, because some people have taken it a while ago, it's still valid, but it's on the old scoring rubric, we don't. I would say when we're looking at GRE, you want to look more at the quant and verbal percentiles than you do the raw score. So you really want a high percentile, especially on the quant, because when you get in, the first classes you take are all really quantitatively rigorous. So I would say really focus on that, but look more at the percentiles than the raw score. All right, any other questions? All right, I see one. All right, at what point in the application process did you notify your boss at the previous job that you were planning on attending business school the next year? Great question.
I guess I'll start. I waited until I was fully accepted into school, which I got a lot of slack for at my job. I didn't ask my immediate boss for a recommendation. So when she did find out that I had gotten into school, she was a little offended that I didn't ask her. But I went to a previous boss for a recommendation, and even he was a little weary about like me not telling her. But I feel safe with my recommendation. I was up for promotion. It was something that I didn't want to diminish what I had in my job by letting them know that I was basically 4 months out the door. So I did something a little bit different. I know people have different experiences.
Yeah, I mean, I was very transparent from the beginning, and, told them that I was going to be looking at business school, got recommendations from my supervisor and other people in the organization. I think it depends on, the type of relationship you have with your supervisor. I think most people would be pretty understanding. Like, they realize that, you want to move up in your careers, you want to do more. And I think it's very natural for a lot of people. So I would imagine most employers would be pretty supportive of you. If not, I think that's fine too. Like Esme, kind of did this, didn't tell her supervisor, which worked out well for her. So.
Yeah. So I guess you have to play it by ear with what's happening in your current role. I know if you're in an industry where it's almost expected, I know a lot of teachers, it's actually becoming more and more common in education to go back and get your MBA. They are more happy for you than not. In insurance, not a lot of people have their MBAs, so it was kind of like from left field that I was considering this. So just playing those and considering those in your industry as well as in your specific workplace.
Yeah, and if you want to sort of clarify for us as an admissions committee, you can just send us an email saying, I chose XYZ recommender for this reason, and just let us know if you think that you need to explain it a little bit further. Awesome. Any last questions? All right, I guess not. Well, what I want to do is just make sure that you guys have some additional information. Our consortium liaisons actually have their own email address. So if you want to connect with someone in the consortium here at Georgetown, you can use that first email address that you see up top on the slide. I would also put in a plug for our Focus on Diversity event that's going to be taking place November 4th this year on the Saturday. I would definitely recommend coming in for that if you can. It just gives you a really good sense of what life is like at Georgetown. We're also doing an admissions case study, so you can sort of be in the driver's seat as the admissions committee and understand how we're looking at your application and evaluating it. The next day, our GWIB, our Graduate Women in Business Club, is doing a brunch. So for any women that want to stay over, you're welcome to sign up for the brunch. All this is on our website. And then I would also say just, check us out in terms of our Tumblr blog. I think we have a couple of consortium blogs up there from students that have written them to get a little bit more about student life. But other than that, thank you guys so much for joining us. And please do send some questions our way via our consortium email address or our general inbox. And we look forward to seeing you at an event or reading your application. Have a good one. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.